Just a few weeks ago, this entire area was a mass of wild flowers in full bloom. But this is a truly semi-arid area. In fact, so arid that it's bordering on desert. And you've all heard about deserts in bloom. Well, it's the same kind of process. That doesn't last long. So while there is a lot for tortoises to eat when those flowers are in bloom and when all that green, fresh vegetation is about, that period is very short. It doesn't last long at all, really only a couple of months out of 12. And the rest of the time, there's very little to eat. And at this time of year, now into July, there's effectively nothing to eat. Not only that, but the temperatures are incredibly high. We've just had air temperatures 37, 38, 39 Celsius. The ground surface temperatures are over 50 degrees Celsius, which is so hot that any tortoise exposed on that for any period of time at all is going to fatally overheat very quickly. So these conditions are simply not conducive to any kind of activity at all. And this is the time of year when they enter that state that we've talked about before called estivation, which is a kind of brumation type process where they dig down and get away from inclement temperatures in winter because it's too cold, but now because it's too hot. So they brumate underground and hide and wait until autumn when it cools down a bit. And we can never say from one year to the next when exactly they're going to emerge because it varies from year to year. Sometimes it can be mid to late September. Other times it can be October or even as far away as November. It's impossible to say. It just depends what the weather does. The key thing that really makes a difference is rain. If we get heavy rain in autumn, then they will emerge with that first rain, and simultaneously the buried eggs in the nests will hatch. But if the rain doesn't come, they may stay down there for much, much longer. This is the process. And if we compare that to the activity cycles of captive animals, particularly captive animals where people keep them indoors, which is an absolutely horrendous way to keep them. And if they keep them indoors, they are active and feeding the whole time. That is completely different than here in the wild, where everything is cyclic. And there are very long periods when they're not eating and when they're not doing anything at all. And one of those things they're not doing when that process is in play is they're not constantly feeding, and therefore they're not growing. And that's one of the reasons why, in combination with the fact that the UV levels here are great, the soils here are incredibly rich in calcium. But the key thing that helps them to develop really good bone density is that they're not overfeeding and they are in general growing quite slowly. I've had a couple of specific questions from our members and I'm going to try to answer those for you. But as with most things, I can't give absolute answers because there is natural variability from day to day, week to week, and month to month, and even year to year. It just depends on the weather. But the first question that I've had is, what kind of times of day are tortoises active? And the answer to that is it changes. Early in spring, they can be active quite a bit throughout the day. Almost any time of day you can find them because the temperatures are probably in the low 20s. The air temperatures may be around 21, 22, 23 Celsius. And there's enough sun for them to bask, get their body temperature up to just over 30. That's great. They can be active at any time of day. As we move on through April, May, the temperatures by midday increase. They get hotter and hotter and hotter as the months roll on, until they're like now, when it's so hot there's no activity. But there's an intermediate period where it can still be quite pleasant for tortoises, and they will have an activity period from maybe 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning until maybe 9 or 10 o'clock, although that period gets reduced as temperatures go up. And then again, maybe they may be active in the evening from maybe 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock. So you have a bimodal period of activity. So there could be 2 activity cycles a day. The other question relates to diet. And the question is, what is the ratio of fresh green to dry material that they eat? And again, the answer to that is it varies continuously. Early on in spring, when there's loads of lush green, fresh new vegetation about, they're going to eat mostly that, although they will voluntarily still take some dry material from time to time. But most of the diet is probably going to be fairly lush, fresh green stuff, green leaves, flowers, and so on. As we move on later through April and into May and certainly into June, the amount of edible green vegetation gets less and less and less until it's non-existent. And at that point, they will eat a combination, a mix of what little green vegetation they can find combined with the dry material. Interestingly, if you do get, even late on in that period, heavy rain for any reason, such as a thunderstorm, they will emerge during that and they will start nibbling at dry stuff because there's water. And they do need water to some degree to process the vegetation, the food that they eat. So if there's no water, it's very difficult for them to just eat a lot of dry material. So to eat a dry material, they do need a source of water. But they have an ability to some degree to generate water internally. A lot of reptiles can do this. It's called metabolic water. I have written about that in some of the books. But really, in practical terms, to eat a lot of dry material, they do need some rain or a source of fresh water. And there's very few sources of fresh standing water out here. This is semi-desert, and you just don't get water sitting around. As you can imagine, with surface temperatures, 30, 40, 50 degrees Celsius, water doesn't stick around for very long. Although the tortoises are now in estivation, there are a few animals that are still active. There's snakes, there's lizards, and there's this Iberian ibex that we found sheltering under an olive tree. Despite there being no tortoises active right now, we do have some experiments still running. We've got a number of data loggers buried and planted, including some right inside a tortoise nest, so we can measure the incubation temperatures that a wild nest experiences throughout the period from when it's laid until when the babies hatch. So we'll be returning to check that out periodically, and certainly we'll be looking at that when it rains or just after it's rained, when the babies will have hatched. So we have got quite a few things going on, and we're also doing some research at the moment into different substrates and a whole variety of other things. So we will be bringing that to you in due course. Until then, try to stay cool. It's a bit difficult for us out here, but certainly if you're somewhere else in Northern Europe, it's probably a little bit easier. But out here right now, it's absolutely baking. And I'm going to seek some shelter, just like the tortoises have done.